the Oxygen Addict Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors PrecisionHydration.com.
Precision Hydration offer electrolyte drinks in different strengths to match how you sweat. Personalise your hydration strategy today at precisionhydration.com and get a free box or tube of pH worth up to $9.99 using the code OxygenAddict.
We're also brought to you by foodsell.co.uk.
The next generation of top tube nutritional carriers for your bike, designed to allow endurance triathletes and cyclists to carry enough food and gels while allowing easy access. Use the code FREEPOST for free delivery worldwide. Check it out at foodsell.co.uk.
And we're also brought to you by stompthepedal.co.
A UK-based sportswear brand designed specifically for women, featuring unique, bright, bold and stylish designs. Using the code OxygenAddict for 20% off at stompthepedal.co.
Alright, and this week we have a very special episode for you.
With menopause, it really isn't discussed. Like vaginal dryness, what? Who's talking about that? I don't want to know.
It's not like when you have a period and you know you're going to get it every month. It doesn't work like that when you're menopausal.
The narrative around the menopause is that women are sour, that they're grumpy, that they're sweaty, that they're sexless, that they're dried up or had.
It's constant up and down.
It can be okay, and it can be a time in life when women actually feel like on a watershed and quite empowered. But I do know that for some women it can actually be horrendous. And I remember as a GP just seeing women who had no idea what was going on, but just didn't feel well.
But it is something that happens, and people need to talk about it because then there are better solutions.
Yeah, we are talking all things menopause this week, Rob. And I'll tell you why, because so many people, like coaches, athletes, parents, loads of people got in touch after we did the special episodes about periods back in the summer. And I kind of realised actually that we can do something to help sporty females of all ages by talking about these things a little bit more. So we can help like educate ourselves, obviously, and help others just by having those conversations. And I figured that getting people to talk, it helps you realise that you're not alone, and you can appreciate that other people are going through similar, and it can just be so reassuring.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a real eye-opener for our male listeners as well, because your partner or your wife might have this ahead of them, they might be going through it, or they might even be beyond it. But I think to have a better understanding of what's actually going on in their body and being able to talk about it will be really helpful. And I know that listening to the bits of the audio clips you've sent through to me has been fairly eye-opening for me, Helen, along the way.
I think, what was the word you described it as, Rob?
Toe curling, I think, in places is fair to describe.
Okay, so first of all then, what is the menopause? Here's Dr. Juliet McGrattan to explain.
Before the menopause, you have your monthly cycle and your hormones go up and down, and every month your ovaries release an egg. And what happens around the menopause is that ovulation, that monthly triggering of the ovary to release an egg, stops. It becomes intermittent at first and then gradually stops as your hormone levels then reduce. So it's not something that kind of happens all at once. It's something that can span over a number of years. Symptoms actually can go on for 5-10 years before and after. So although we call it the menopause, it's not a kind of specific moment in time where something switches off. It's a gradual change. The average age in the UK for the menopause is 51. But as I say, the symptoms can start a good number of years before that. So in most women, average really, about 45, 46, people might starting to be getting some symptoms. And then again, after the menopause, the symptoms don't just suddenly switch off. They gradually disappear over a number of years sometimes. I don't want to paint it in a really negative light, because actually it can be okay. And it can be a time in life when women actually feel like on a watershed and quite empowered and can make really positive changes in their life. But I do know that for some women it can actually be horrendous. And I remember as a GP just seeing women who had no idea what was going on, but just just didn't feel well. They thought they were losing the plot. They thought they were getting dementia. They were forgetting things. They were all over the place. They were emotional, struggling at work, struggling at home, and actually hadn't really realised what was going on. So for some people, it can be really, really difficult. In the early stages, when you're perimenopausal, we call it, so kind of leading up to the menopause, you can have trouble with your periods. So you can have irregular bleeding, sometimes heavier bleeding, and then as the bleeding starts to diminish, you can have flushes and sweat, tiredness, mood changes, headaches, palpitations, joint and muscle pains. Lots of women really complain that they gain weight around that time, which can be quite an issue, and things like reduced libido, so you lose your sex drive, and vaginal dryness. So, you name a symptom, and really it can be a problem. Knowledge is power. So I think, first of all, actually understanding what's going on. That sounds basic, but actually sometimes people don't really realise. They just notice that things aren't quite right. So understanding, reading as much as you can about what's going on in your body and how it might affect you. I would head to Menopause Matters online. That's kind of written by a team of medics and it's evidence-based, really good advice, all about supplements that you can use, evidence for HRT, risks, benefits, symptoms that you'll get. Really, 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 really sound advice on Menopause Matters. Then I think, actually, as I said at the beginning, it can be a very positive time. So I think sometimes it's actually just doing a little bit of a health MOT. Am I getting enough sleep? Am I stressed from other reasons? Am I eating well? Can I improve my nutrition? Can I crank up the fresh fruit and veg I'm getting so that my body's getting really what it needs? Those simple lifestyle things can make such a difference. So obviously, if you're regularly exercising, then exercise is a really powerful tool to help you through the menopause, because it can help in so many ways to alleviate. I mean, obviously, if you're having mood changes, it's a great way to take out some of your frustrations on the pavement rather than on somebody else, and can help to ease things like the weight gain and the headaches, and actually kind of energize you a little bit. So exercise can be a really powerful tool. But there are some women, who really struggle, and their lifestyle changes don't always seem to be enough. And that's the time to be having a conversation with your doctor about whether using something like an HRT might be appropriate for you. That there was a big push years ago to have everybody on HRT. Then there was a big swing in the other direction where it's not safe, let's take everybody off. And then now we're coming back to the kind of more sensible, pragmatic approach. And actually, for some women, the benefits outweigh the risks. So it's definitely something to consider and can make a big difference to many women. And I have seen women who just say it changed their life. They went from feeling like they were completely losing it to actually feeling quite normal again. So it is a very individual thing, but it's definitely worth having a conversation with your GP. But I would always encourage everybody to look at their lifestyle and see what changes they can make that way as well.
There you go, in a nutshell. Thank you very much to Dr. Juliet McGrattan for giving that brilliant overview. Well, over the next hour or so, we will go into loads more detail about so much that Juliet mentioned there in those sort of 5 minutes. We're going to have an excellent interview with Dr. Stacy Sims, which I think will really help female athletes of all ages, but especially if you are at or nearing this stage in your life. I also wanted to make this episode more relatable to you. So we've got a number of interviews with some age group triathletes, ultra runners, etc., who are going through the perimenopause and the menopause right now. Let's start off with Fiona Russell, who loves all things outdoors, as well as swim, bike, run.
I'm actually better known as Fiona Outdoors. I run a website called Fiona Outdoors, which is all about outdoors adventure. And I recently included a section on fit over 50, and that includes a lot of information about fitness and the menopause, because it's a topic that doesn't seem to have been discussed more recently.
So if I say the word menopause to you, how do you react?
I think one absolute bummer, really. The menopause to me is just a pain, and it just feels like it's an obstacle in the way of staying fit and healthy as I'm getting older. And I'm the sort of person who likes to sort of work out why I'm feeling like things and find solutions. I don't tend to just suffer with things. So I have probably, looking back, suffered from a range of health issues since my early 40s. I'm now 50, actually. And these included things like migraines, exhaustion, poor sleep, itchy skin, urinary infections. But what actually sent me to the doctors and then ultimately to HRT was cramps. So I was getting cramps in my feet, my calves, my hands, my shoulders, my abdominal muscles. And sometimes these would actually cause tears in my muscles. So that meant that I then couldn't do my sport. So, for example, I got stuck in the middle of a swimming pool with terrible cramps and couldn't even get to the edge of a pool. That put paid to my triathlon. It meant I was very wary about doing sport because I'd worry about getting cramps. I'd get cramps in all sorts of places. And that was then making me feel depressed because exercise is my thing. It's my sort of me time. It's my escape. So I had a look around on various forums, menopause forums, a lot of them in America. And lots of women were talking about sort of cramps in their feet at night. And I was thinking, maybe mine's just a little bit more severe than that. So I'll have a little think about it. And I wondered if it wasn't a hormonal imbalance. So I went to the doctors, and after a discussion and a check of my medical history, I decided to try HRT. And amazingly, within a couple of months of being on HRT, the cramps went, which to me just seems, it adds up to the fact it must be hormonal, unless it's some amazing coincidence. So that's why I'm on HRT. And that's what one of the symptoms I think that many women don't realise is connected to hormones, although I have no scientific evidence for that, obviously.
And so you'd never had suffered from the cramps up until this point?
I'd had some mild cramps associated sometimes with tiredness, for example, when skiing or swimming, but I'd never had it so bad that I actually couldn't move. I couldn't get my legs to release or my shoulders to release. And in fact, my hands were cramping when I was doing things like squeezing a toothpaste tube or reaching for something. So all the muscles would just cramp up. And I've honestly not had any of that since I went on HRT. And another weird side effect of this HRT, because HRT isn't a cure-all. I mean, I still do get hot sweats at times when obviously my hormones are fluctuating so much. But I was also getting stomach issues when running. So I was having runner's trots, basically. And that was getting really bad. And I was ending up, after races, if I pushed myself quite hard, I'd end up with nausea for up to 48 hours. And again, so that was an odd thing that I hadn't really suffered with before. And since I've started the HRT, that has reduced significantly as well. And I know lots of other women of my age who run who've also had lots of problems with stomach issues and nausea.
And I guess when a fit and active lifestyle kind of makes you who you are, then suddenly when there are these barriers in the way and all of these side effects, it must make it pretty miserable.
I was absolutely desperate. I mean, I just couldn't understand how I'd gone from being somebody who just assumed I'd be able to go out and do things. I mean, obviously I do train, but I've always had a really good level of fitness and I love it. It's what I do. It's what I write about. It's what I do in my leisure time. It's what I do with my friends. And I was ending up feeling really low about it because I could only really go for a walk. And even then my feet felt sore. And I also struggled because I couldn't find any information out about it. Although I talked to my friends and we were all sort of suffering similar sort of issues, there was no medical research or science-based information that we could find. I did come across the book Raw, and I have looked online at various people's blogs, but there didn't seem to be a sort of collection of scientific information. And I do wonder if, because I am always kept fit and I'm quite in tune with what my body's capable of, that maybe I notice some of these issues more than other people because I'm very aware of what I'm capable of doing. And, for example, I would go out and I'd be able to walk 3 Munros at Scottish mountains over the height of 3,000 feet. And I was collecting those. There's 282 of them. And for an entire summer, I couldn't even walk up anything I couldn't walk up a steep hill because my calves were cramping so badly. So that meant I couldn't even do the basic things like walking mountains, which to me was basic.
And how are you feeling now?
I find the menopause irritating. It affects, I think I don't know where I'm at with it. I'm probably knee deep in it, I would say. The HRT is probably masking quite a lot of the symptoms, but I still suffer with really poor sleep and sweats at night and also in the day. But I would say that I feel more positive because I feel like I'm coping with it better. I am sure that if I returned to the doctors and I adjusted my HRT, I could make it better. And I know that there are ways, if you've got access to private health, that you can monitor your hormone levels much better. Because I saw the programme with Mariella Frostop, and she was saying that it's possible to sort of manage HRT and your hormones much better by doing tests. I'm finding that it's sort of okay for most of the month. I mean, I still have probably, I would say, about 7 or 8 days in a month where I feel pretty exhausted. And so I just excuse myself from exercise. I exercise and keep fit on the days when I feel like I can. And I feel like I'm coping and I feel like I've got, it's positive again, albeit it is very irritating to be affected so badly by your hormones. I think that I thought that because I was slim and fit that I would just sort of float through the menopause without a problem. I've never really had problems with major problems with periods, and I thought it'd all be fine. And I've been really shocked by how much it has affected me.
And I guess part of it is that you don't know, sort of from day to day, exactly how it's going to affect you.
Absolutely. I mean, you can wake up and you can feel great, and then at midday you feel shattered. You can wake up feeling shattered and then at midday feel great, and you don't know even what the weekend's going to bring. You have to learn, I think, to be kinder to yourself. And I think maybe that comes with age anyway. Maybe it is something that you have to learn. And indeed, recovery is really, really important. So I used to be able to just keep going every day, and I would have lighter days and heavier days of exercise. But now I find I really do need a day of rest where I do nothing more than a 20-minute walk with the dog. And possibly that is to do with age. I mean, I speak to men of a similar age, and they also find that they take longer to recover or they need more rest. But it is frustrating not to know how you're going to be from day to day or week to week. And I think I've had some coaching actually for various events that I've done. And I think more and more coaches are learning and understanding that women of this age want to keep fit. They want to achieve well, but they also need to take into account their hormones. And I think the more we talk about it, the more people will understand it. And perhaps someday there'll be some scientific research done into it that will help future generations.
And it's the sort of the sporty angle as well, like the really, as triathletes, as outdoorsy people, we are a little bit different to the normal population in terms of, fitness levels, and that must be hard as well.
Yeah, I think there just hasn't been possibly a generation that has continued to stay fit. The fit women in particular have continued to stay fit, or they've taken up fitness again once the children are a little bit older. And we are one of the first generations that has really stayed fit into our 50s. And there's so many of us. I mean, I write a series called Fit Over 50 on the website, and it's been so popular because everyone can nominate 5 different people that they think is inspiring, men and women, obviously, but women in particular. And perhaps the old cliche where, you got to 48, your children had left home, you took up knitting and making pickles or something, has completely changed. And I think there are women I see many incredibly inspiring women in their 50s and 60s and even 70s who are at the pinnacle of fitness. I mean, they're beating people in their 20s and 30s, and it's amazing. But behind the scenes, there's all this other stuff going on that, if you think about it, if we're actually coping with all these hormones as well and all these difficulties, yet we're still performing and getting on the podium, that's quite incredible. Like, I'll give you an example. I did the Dramathon Marathon, which is a marathon run between all the whiskey distilleries in Speyside recently. And the woman who was the overall winner, I mean, she beat everyone in this marathon by about 20 minutes. She was in her 50s and she was the winner of this event. And she only took up running in her mid-30s. And I got her afterwards and I said, you know, how are you doing? And she says, oh, yeah, you know, it's all fine, but the menopause. So we got onto the topic and she said she'd actually done things like she'd had to cut all her hair short because the hot sweats while she was running was just too much to bear. So she cut all her hair off.
Wow. Oh my God.
And we just have different coping mechanisms.
And if you had a, you know, I don't know, a hot flush in the middle of being out on your bike or
yes,
or running, and can you describe what's it like for people that are not yet there?
So it just feels like a huge heat that comes. I think mine usually starts somewhere about my head, and then your whole body just goes into this sudden, overwhelming, hot flush sweat. I mean those words describe it well, a sweat, a flush, and it comes really, really quickly. So for example, I was doing a track running session with my triathlon club recently, and it was a really chilly evening, and then suddenly I'm doing my first lap and I feel so hot, like it just burning hot. So I'm thinking I've got to get to the end of this 400 meters and I have to take off clothes because you just get this urge to strip off. You need to get everything off. And then unfortunately, of course, you've had this sweat. It's sweat dripping down your back. It's on your face. It's in your armpits, everywhere. It feels really uncomfortable. You take a top off to cool down, and then suddenly the sweat dries on you and you're freezing. So you're shivering.
So you can't win.
No, and you can be. I find, say, for example, I get in the car and my husband's got the heat suited to him, and I'm screaming at him, how can it be so hot? Why does it have to be so hot? And he's like, no, love, it's fine. It's not that hot. And I'm like, oh my God, I need to peel everything off. So you pull all your stuff off. And then about 3 minutes later, you want to put it back on again. And it is, but it's embarrassing as well. You know, women, you see my friends, we're sat in a group and they go bright red and sweat, even just sitting in a pub, bright red, sweat drips down the face, or they're at work. And fortunately, more and more women are now just saying, even in a group of guys, you know, really sorry, hot sweat, the menopause. You know, it's like I suffer with poor memory and I get confused about certain things, really embarrassing. That's another effect of the menopause. And you feel debilitated. You feel like you're getting early onset dementia. It's horrible, really horrible. And you meet people, you're trying to introduce them, or you've forgotten their names, or you forget everybody's children's names. And I now just say, really sorry, menopause brain.
And just be upfront and honest about it.
Totally. I'm really upfront about it. And probably, I mean, there's some guys who get really shocked. And I say, you know, well, that's what we're dealing with. Lucky you guys not to have to deal with it.
That's it.
And the other thing I think is really important, and lots of men have said this, so when I write about the menopause, I do then put it on social media, and I say, you know, look away if you're not interested. But then quite a few guys have come on to the thread and said, thanks for telling me, because we have no idea. We've got partners and wives who are going to have to go through it or are going through it, and it really helps us to understand, because women can turn into monsters. I mean, you can hate yourself on certain days. You can be so irritated by yourself because you're forgetful, you're short-tempered, you're stupid, and then you get a hot sweat. And if you're feeling that, and then you take it out on your nearest and dearest, you always do. And so for men and even children to be able to understand what's going on is really helpful.
And Rob, that is why we are doing this podcast, to help others to understand just what is going on. And Fiona mentioned the book Raw, which is written by Dr Stacy Sims, who we will be hearing from later in the podcast.
I think she did an incredible job then of painting the picture of what it was like for her and the impact it's had on her sporting life. And, you know, to experience being able to swim happily and then all of a sudden your whole body just being racked by horrendous cramps. Those side effects of the menopause sound really grim, don't they?
And you just, like, I don't know if it's something that maybe, I guess because you haven't been through it. I haven't been through it yet. I get all this to
yet.
come. You're never going to go through it. But then why would you even think about it? Why would you, unless you've got someone in your life who's going through it, you just don't really, do you?
Well, one of my mates the other day was going, "You're recording a special on what?" What interested that is that to me, as a male triathlete? And you kind of think, well, it's everything about what goes on in your life, because if you've got a mother going through it, a partner who's going through it, a wife going through it, or is, and probably even more importantly, about to go through it. And no one's ever talked to me about this ever. I've heard my mum say, "Oh, I had some hot flushes," but the impact it has on people's sporting lives and things like that just never even occurred to me. So it's been really eye-opening.
Wow, that's it. And we're going to be hearing from Dr Stacy Sims, who I've mentioned a couple of times, but she's got loads of advice and information for athletes facing the menopause. But having heard some of what Fiona's going through right now, throw into the mix training for an Ironman. So what's it like? I just don't know if I can think about it.
Can you?
No. But anyway, we're going to find out what's it like to balance trying to qualify for Kona and being at the pointy end of your age group with going through the menopause.
Hi, my name's Mel Hayes. I am 51 years old and currently going through the menopause. I am a GB athlete and also I am a triathlon coach too, the Smiling Tri coach.
Why did you decide to talk to me about the menopause?
I think because there are a lot more women sort of getting into triathlon much later in life, and I think it's really important that it's a topic that's spoken about from an athlete's perspective, but also from a coaching perspective as well, because I don't think, coaches are now coaching much older athletes, and they probably don't have a lot of awareness of how the menopause affects the athletes they're coaching. So it's just raising awareness, but also just so that women maybe feel a little bit more confident to talk to their coaches or talk to other athletes about it, so that people are just more aware of the difficulties that are involved in going through the menopause.
So you said you're going through it at the moment. When would you say symptoms started for you?
Probably in 2016, when my period started to become sort of irregular. So before that, I pretty much had a sort of 28-day cycle, and so I knew when my periods were coming, which, when I listened to your Blood, Sweat and Gears podcast, that was great, and I identified with a lot of that. But then once you hit the menopause or perimenopause, or as they call it, and your periods suddenly become really irregular, that's kind of the first sign that I had. And then probably the beginning of 2017, I started getting the hot sweats, hot flushes, as they call them, and just being woken up maybe 5 or 6 times a night, boiling hot. So, I would get the hot flushes during the day as well, but I could manage them. And it wasn't that I wasn't really managing the hot flushes themselves. They're irritating, but it's the sleep deprivation that is the problem. And so that was started in 2017. So that happened before I raced Ironman UK in 2017. And I just found it exhausting because, as we all know, that recovery is so important to athletes, and I wasn't getting the recovery I needed. But at that point, I'd been to see my GP, and they said, we think you're probably perimenopausal, and we can prescribe HRT if you want it. And I said, this was about a month out from doing Ironman UK. And I thought, I don't really know how I'm going to react on HRT, so I didn't want to take it at that point in time, because some of my friends who'd spoken to said, it can make your periods really heavy. And I thought, that's the last thing I need, So I did Ironman UK just on, very little sleep, which was tough. But I guess, on race day, you just get on with it, don't you? You have to. Then I had the World Long Course Duathlon Championships coming up in September of that year, 2017. And I thought, as soon as Ironman UK is over, I'll start taking the HRT to see if that makes any difference, because I knew I had 2 clear months. And if I had really heavy periods, and then obviously I could come off it straight away. But to be honest, for me, it was a bit of a miracle cure. As soon as, I was on a very, very low dose. So people who don't know much about HRT, you can get different strengths of HRT. So I was put on a 1 mg, which is very low dose. But that overnight, sort of pretty much within sort of 4 weeks, I'd stopped having the hot sweats. I was sleeping much better. And I can't tell you what a massive difference that made to me as an athlete, because I then went on to win the World Long Course Duathlon Championships in my age group. And I have to put that down to probably be getting better recovery. I've been on HRT for about just over a year now, and I don't get hot flushes as much, but what I've noticed recently is I get very anxious. So I suffer from anxiety. Things that wouldn't have normally bothered me suddenly bother me a lot more. I'm a bit more angry and sometimes don't feel completely in control, which is obviously tough on my family, and obviously I try to not to let me affect my work. But it also affects my motivation to train sometimes. So, again, maybe I've got to a point where I might need to increase my HRT dosage. But that's a conversation I still need to have with my GP. But yeah, that's kind of how it's affected me as an athlete. I've had some really interesting conversations with people of my age at race starts. We tend to talk about the menopause because the people in my age group are going through the menopause too. So, I've had an interesting conversation at the World Long Course Championships this year with another athlete, and we basically said, I haven't had a period for nearly 6 months, and lo and behold, it's race day and I've got a period. And the unfortunate thing about that race was that we put our transition bags in the day before, so we had no access to our transition bags. So there was no way that we could put a Tampax into our bags. So we basically, I was very lucky, but because I had a very light period, but my friend who, she had a really heavy period, and, she said it was a bit of a car crash by the end, and we were in GB, suits, which are blue. So you can imagine it's not nice.
How has it impacted on your training? Because you said that recovery had, you weren't able to get the recovery in. Have you adapted your training over the past two years?
I think what I've done more is gone to bed earlier, gone to bed at ridiculously early times. Although I'm a coach, I still have a coach because I had him before I became a coach myself. And, we've kind of been through a journey together because he's never coached anyone who's been through the menopause. He's had a couple of athletes on his book since. But it's, having those conversations, those open conversations, so that I just I feel too tired, and just putting more recovery or slightly different sessions or lighter sessions into your plan. But I'm a very motivated athlete, and I like to do what's in my plan. Sometimes it has been really tough, and I think I'm probably been more susceptible to illness. Because I haven't had the recovery I need, so I'll be more susceptible to getting a cold or a bit of a cough. So again, those are the knock-on effects. And the motivation is the thing as well. When you're, if you feel tired, it's really difficult to motivate yourself to train. But, as I say, I'm a fairly motivated athlete, so I have kind of pushed myself on. But then, that's one of the things I kind of want to learn as well, from a coaching perspective, but also, as an athlete, it's like, are there different ways I can train as someone going through the menopause? Is there a better way to train? Because it's not like when you have a period and you're going to get it every month, and you could say, well, if I had a bad period, I could have a recovery week that week, make that my recovery week. It doesn't work like that when you're menopausal. It's kind of constant, and it's constant up and down. And you don't know when you're going to have a bad day and a good day. Yeah.
It's really difficult to plan. What was the conversation like for the first time, when you chatted to your coach?
Well, I suppose it's a bit embarrassing. I suppose I'm a bit of a sharer. I like to share information, and also I feel, well, that's what I'm paying for as well, so to listen to me. But it is an embarrassing conversation to have. When I say embarrassing, it's just difficult because, my coach is a bloke, and he's never going to go through the menopause, and probably, you know, I know that his wife has not reached that stage yet, so it's not something he's aware of or how that's going to change you. I mean, yes, he's always been very sympathetic, but he still doesn't really understand what it's like to go through the menopause.
How old were you when you took up triathlon?
44.
And what made you take it up?
A friend of mine had entered the outlaw full, and he had originally got me to do a duathlon at I think it was Boxing Day duathlon actually. Must have been back in 2013, 2014, and obviously I'd been running in my 30s and done quite a few marathons by the time I was 40. I thought, well, if he can do it, because he can't swim either, and you know, he's a really good runner, but hasn't really been on a bike either. I thought, well, I'll give it a go. But I couldn't swim at 44. I mean, I could, but I was one of those people who swam with their heads out of the water, you know, doing breaststroke, and I still don't consider myself to be a good swimmer. So my first triathlon I did was the Diva Divas, ladies only triathlon, and I won my age group at that triathlon. But I never thought I would do an Ironman, but once my husband decided to do one, I thought, well, I'm not going to be beaten by him. So, and it's kind of been taken over my life, I suppose. And I love inspiring older people that they can do, that they can get into triathlon, and then they can still do really well. And you don't have to have taken it up in your 30s. I mean, I wish I had now, but I didn't even really know that triathlon existed in my 30s. And I see the 30-year-olds at track thinking, God, I wish I'd done it when I was your age. But, you know, I've been very fortunate to get where I am.
How have you found triathlon has helped you deal with the menopause? And perhaps if you hadn't been doing triathlon, maybe you've got friends that don't do it. I mean, do you see that it has helped you?
Yes, because it's a stress buster, isn't it, at the end of the day? It helps me have me time, which I think is really important, especially as I've got 2 teenagers who I love very much, but can be difficult. But so, you know, it's time to that what I call my time, basically. So it gives some structure to my life as well, the training. But yeah, I think it probably obviously does help me deal with the ups and downs of going through the menopause, and hopefully dealing with some of the, you know, the anxiety that causes, and sometimes just the anger that I sometimes feel as well. So I can go and thrash that out on the track or something. And
your diet, have you found that that's changed as well over the past couple of years?
No, I per se haven't really changed my diet because I'm going through the menopause. I have changed it because I'm a triathlete. But I would be really interested if anyone could give me an insight into whether, you know, they feel certain things help them, or whether we need to, because you know I'm not bleeding and not having regular periods. So you know, when you're going through the cycle, you have to make sure that you're taking on enough iron, don't you, when you're younger? And maybe that's something that I don't need to worry about quite so much now, because I'm obviously not having a regular cycle. But I don't really know is the answer.
What do you think will be the sort of the biggest challenges? You've qualified for Kona for next year, for 2019. Linking in with the menopause, what do you think will be the biggest challenges for you training ahead of Kona and Roth? You're doing Roth as well.
Yeah, I am doing Roth as well. Big year. Trying to not let the emotional roller coaster that the menopause causes have too much of an effect on me, but you know, being aware that I do get days where I feel quite down and a bit depressed, and I think that's definitely a symptom of the menopause, and also that the feelings of anxiety that I get sometimes don't sort of take over my ability to train. So again, it's trying to manage those, and maybe, you know, I need to find other ways of managing those through doing, I don't know, some meditation or some mindfulness, anything else, you know, that can help. And again, quite happy to hear from anyone else who's found things that work. But yes, and as you know, again, I'll go back to the whole thing about recovery, you know, making sure that I get enough recovery. And having spoken to a few other women going through the menopause, they say that the biggest thing is the fatigue that we get, and just maybe factoring a bit more recovery into my training plan, which is hard because I want to, I really, really want to be in the best shape ever next year. I mean, originally when I qualified for Kona, it was just like, yay, I've done it, I can just go and enjoy it now, but I'm far too competitive from that, and obviously I know I'm not going to win my age group, but I would like to be, I'd like to walk away and say I gave it everything I could. Obviously I don't know how I'm going to cope with the conditions out there, and again, that's another thing, being menopausal, will the humidity really affect me, and my ability to deal with the heat? I've always been very lucky in that I do deal with the heat quite well, so there's all sorts of factors that I probably need to try and find a way of overcoming.
And what message would you have for other coaches when it comes to the menopause?
I think it's really important now that coaches factor in some way of finding out whether their athletes are going through the menopause. I think once you some women go through the menopause very, very early and can go through the menopause from sort of the age of 35. But generally, if you've got women sort of 45 plus, then that's when they're starting to hit the menopause. And it's just having those, making sure that you ask those questions, up front. I mean, that doesn't necessarily have to be a face-to-face chat. It could just be that, when you take on a new athlete, making sure that your athlete profile questionnaire has some sort of section that says, are you going through the menopause at the moment? Do you have any symptoms? What are you doing to manage those symptoms? And then, I think as an athlete, if you can, just make sure that you talk about it. But I know not everyone is that good at sharing information, which is why it's so important that the coaches are asking the questions. I mean, they may not know the answers, but at least if they're aware of, if someone's putting on their training peaks and I'm just having a really bad time, they might say, well, is that just because what's going on in your life, family-wise, or is that because you're having a particularly bad time at the moment because you're going through the menopause? So, the menopause can go on for 10 years, so it's a long, long period of our lives. Coaches have got to find a way of talking to their athletes about it in some way. And still a lot of coaches are still male. There aren't that many female coaches around, but there are a lot more female athletes of my age doing triathlon.
And Mel makes some good points, I think, there about having those conversations and being open about it and willing to talk about it, especially if you're a coach, because with my coaching hat on, it's another one of those things where you go, I'd never even considered that some of my older female athletes might be having these issues. And of course it affects everything about the training, right? 'Cause it affects everything about their lives. Definitely,
and the recovery, and it's massive. But yeah, unless you know, then doing this kind of thing,
why would you know?
Exactly. And as a coach, it can only help sort of you or any other coach to be a better coach.
Yeah, totally.
So a reminder that you are listening to a special episode from the Oxygen Addict Triathlon podcast, all about the menopause.
Right, so we're brought to you every week. We're going to have a quick break here to chat about our sponsors. First up, precisionhydration.com. If you guys are training indoors a lot at the moment and sweating a lot, or if you're experiencing cramps in the pool, or you're thinking about going out and doing a hot race, or who knows, maybe you even are going out to do one of the 70.3s like in Oman at the moment, and you've got hot races on the horizon, or you've got a training camp coming up and there's heat on your horizon. It's hard to imagine, isn't it, Hells, at the moment, having heat on the horizon with the British weather the way it is. But I think Precision Hydration are the best electrolyte supplement available. Doesn't taste salty. You can add it to any of your drinks. It comes in individualized concentration, so it can actually match the way that you sweat. And what we mean by that is normally you just drop a tablet into your drink and hope for the best. With these guys, they've got 250, 500, 750 or 1000 milligram sachets to add the amount of sodium into your drink that you need. If you're not sure how much you need, well, that's great as well. They've got you covered there, because what you're going to do is go to their website, take their online sweat test, and if it points to the fact you are a very heavy or very salty sweater, you can then have an in-person sweat test done as well. And for me, that was a key thing to unlocking the fact that I sweat something like 8 times more than the average person in terms of sodium concentration. That's why I was cramping all the time in the pool. That's why I kept ending up in the medical tent on hot races on hot days. So go over and check them out at precisionhydration.com. And remember, you can use the code OxygenAddict to get £9.99 worth of free product from them. Other sponsors to talk about, we're also brought to you by relatively recently back on the scene with us as a sponsor, foodcell.co.uk. Hells, I love Foodcell.
Yes, and Rob, I was thinking, you know what, it's not actually that long until, when you look at a calendar, it's not that long to some of those first early races like Outlaw Half in Nottingham, you're doing Mallorca 70.3, any of those, you better be thinking about how you're going to be carrying your nutrition and training with it as well.
That's right. So what you don't want to be doing is trying to sellotape 15 gels onto your top tube and ruining the £7,000 race bike that you might have bought, ruining the aerodynamics. What you need is a food cell. What you need is sleekly attached to the top tube. You need a little sliding mechanism on the top. You can operate with one hand, get your gels or your food in and out with one hand, and then reseal it up. I raced with one of these on a day when it rained, and everything inside stayed dry because it was waterproof, which is something, I've got to be honest, I'd never thought about until I raced in the rain with one that got wet, and all my flap jacket disintegrated. So Mark at Food Cell has thought of everything with these little angles here. You can even unclip it off your bike really easily if you've got top tube bolts, or take it off easily if you use the Velcro to attach it with, and wash it out afterwards so it doesn't get all mingy and sticky and have things growing in it. So it is a really amazingly well thought out product. It's bigger than most of the ones out there, so you can actually get loads of stuff into it. And it's really useful as you're riding as well. So again, operating it one-handed, something you don't think about until you try to actually operate it one-handed as you're riding.
Correct.
So go and check it out over at foodcell.co.uk. They deliver worldwide for free using the code FREEPOST. And we've also got a third sponsor this week, Hells, StompThePedal.co. Tell us all about them, please.
So they are a UK-based sportswear brand which is designed specifically for women. They have unique, they have bright, they have bold, they have stylish designs. It was all set up by Tash. You might know her, Natasha Tremaine, and the designs and everything, Rob, are really, really cool. They're really, really funky. The gear is made in, it's really nice stuff.
Yeah,
the gear
really
is made
cool.
in Italy, so it's really good quality kit. I wore it last week at the spin club session. The first thing when I walked in the room was not, Helen, what's the set today? But, Helen, I have kit envy. So,
oh, nice.
Yes. So it is some really classy stuff. Very unique, very comfortable. She's got hats, she's got vests. And she orders a certain amount, so you can be guaranteed that you're not going to go and have everyone else in that same kit. So go and check it out, stompthepedal.co, and you can get 20% off with the code OxygenAddict.
Cool stuff. Right, tell me about what's up next.
Well, hopefully our next guest will be able to educate us all a little bit more about the scientific side of the menopause and what female athletes can do to help alleviate some of the side effects from the menopause while still getting the training in and looking after their bodies at the same time.
Hi, I am Dr. Stacy Sims, and I have been, I guess pigeonholed isn't really the right word, but I'm going to use it, as being the expert in female physiology, especially when it comes to training around the menstrual cycle and on through peri and postmenopause. I'm an environmental exercise physiologist and nutrition scientist, and right now I'm based at the University of Waikato in Mount Maunganui, New Zealand.
Let's start with training. So from a training perspective, how does the menopause impact on someone's training?
Yeah, so with the withdrawal or the lack of estrogen, you really lose an anabolic stimulus.
So with training, people who continue to do like large volume, low intensity, trying to build that aerobic capacity, they're actually not going to be benefiting their body that much. What you want to do is you want to do more power-based work and plyo work because you want to maintain the integrity of the muscle tissue itself, also the neuromuscular firing patterns. So when you start getting into menopause, perimenopause, and after you have the cessation of any kind of bleeding, the focus should really become on more functional, power-based stuff because you have a long history of endurance. And in order for you to keep pace or to get better and adapt, you have to look at really getting those muscle fibers still stimulated with that power-based stuff. And then you have things like you become more carbohydrate sensitive. So you're going to have to look at changing your total diet to reduce total intake of carbohydrate and look more getting the carbs from veggies and grains instead of more of the simple stuff that we tend to use for racing. And also look at increasing our total protein intake, again, because we're losing that stimulus for lean mass development. So our training and our nutrition really need to look at how do we support lean mass development and the slowing down of losing that lean mass. The other concern that we have is with bone mineral density. And a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm a triathlete, I run, I'm going to be able to keep my bone mass. But in fact, what we're finding is that the stress of running really isn't enough to accentuate the bone stress for bone turnover. And we tend to lose 1/3 of our bone mass within the first 5 years of the onset of menopause. So again, going back to that plyometric work and doing some jump and counter jump movements is the kind of stress that you want to increase that bone mineral density, not only the actual volume of the bone, but also the strength of the bone that's being laid down. So these are things, these are things that people don't really talk about or consider when they are getting into this, especially, not coaches and stuff, but the information isn't there. So the coaches are going, okay, well, they're getting older and they're slowing down. Maybe we need to ease back a little bit. But in fact, it should be ramping up the intensity and dialing back the volume.
That is such a scary figure, isn't it, about the losing 1/3 of the bone mass? Yeah.
Yep. It is. And it is because the estrogen has the protective effect and stimulates the bone turnover and the bone density. So when you lose that hormone that's responsible, then your body's like, okay, well, now what? And with athletes who are sweating a lot and going through a lot of calcium, then they're at a greater risk, especially if you tend to be thinner and have longer femur and arm length as well. And that's more of a hereditary thing, but it puts you at a greater risk for stress fractures and osteopenia.
So let's go with the strength training thing. What should someone be doing? I know you mentioned plyometrics, but let's say you're a coach and you're putting together someone's plans. A lot of coaches obviously will just focus on swim, bike, run, but if you're saying about doing the strength training as well, how should that look?
So it doesn't have to be going to a gym. One of my colleagues here who works at Toihomai, she's just finishing up a bone study in looking at the older woman and how much stress you actually need to stimulate that bone growth. And it ends up being 1.5 minutes worth of jumping. So before a run set, doing some bounding work and some counter jump movement as a warm-up is going to benefit the bone and give you that stress that you need. If you're thinking about trying to attenuate the loss of lean mass and doing strength work, again, it can just be body weight work, because a lot of us that are so focused on the swim, bike, run, we think, oh, well, I need to do some functional work. I'll do a plank or I'll do some sit-ups, but that's not enough. It's like doing body weight squats and lunges and push-ups and even star jumps and that kind of stuff that's going to give you that multi-directional strength work that's different from the swim, bike, run work.
So should women change their diet as they go through the menopause? Obviously you mentioned about you become more carb sensitive and about increasing your protein intake. And I guess it is a bit of an overhaul.
It is, and also as we get a bit older, I know a lot of people tend to fall into just gravitating towards foods that they've always had. So the diversity of the food isn't there, and that begins to not really stimulate a good gut microbiome. And it's kind of multi-tiered in the fact that when you're training and your gut's under heat and hypoxia and you're eating foods that are relatively high in sugar, you're going to encourage the growth of the bacteria that makes you crave sugar. So then when you're not training and you're craving carbohydrate, you're not going to be going for like the fruit and veg, you're going to be reaching for that higher sugar content because of the gut bacteria that's making you crave these things. So if we take it a step back and go, well, we need to take care of the gut bacteria when we're not training and we're not racing to increase the diversity of our food, then that's going to also downplay the bacteria that's making you crave simple sugars. So then when you're training and you're eating real food that's not so quick hit carbohydrate, you're also protecting the gut microbiome. So it's a kind of a feed forward, feedback, so to speak, for the longer term health effects, aside just the training and the racing that we're trying to do.
Should you be looking at more real foods rather than some of that sports nutrition?
Definitely. And I always say, we're not as smart as nature. And when you're looking at eating real food, you're getting a lot of cofactors in that food that help absorption and digestion of some of the micronutrients. If you take an orange that's full of vitamin C versus a vitamin C tablet, we tend to pee out a lot more the vitamin C tablet than the vitamin C in the orange because of the different enzymes and cofactors within that real food that's going to allow us to absorb it. And the other aspect is the fructose in the fruit. It comes with pectin, which is, a fiber, and that's protective. So we don't get a big hit of fructose, so it doesn't hurt the liver as if you were taking straight fructose from like a sports drink.
So then when it comes, like in a race or something, a gel's okay? Or again, should we try to go for more real foods even during a race as well?
Yes, even during a race. I'm quite well known for being anti-gel across the board for many reasons. Not only are they effective dehydrators in the fact that you're taking concentrated carbohydrate into a compromised dehydrated gut, which pulls water into the intestines in order for it to be diluted before absorption. But you also have a high fructose content in there for most gels, which can lead to more GI distress, especially in women, because we can only absorb 1/3 of what the guys can. And people who are on FODMAP diets, they don't think about gels and the fructose and simple sugars in the gels and sports products, which can also exacerbate issues with the gut. And then again, it's the simple sugar aspect that can hurt the gut microbiome. So we're thinking about real food aspects. The reason why people take a gel, because it's really easy and gives you a quick hit of sugar. If you're planning the race and you're thinking about what am I doing in the first hour of the bike that's going to help the second hour, what am I doing in the second hour that's going to help me get off and run? And you think your body can handle solid to semi-solid. So you're thinking real food can be sandwiches, can be new potato, salted new potatoes. It could be smushed up Bliss Bowls. And it also depends on
Bliss Bowls.
So you take the Bliss Ball mix, and instead of having balls, you can smush it down into like a square, and it just becomes little bite-sized pieces. So it's really easy to eat for the most part.
I don't think we have Bliss Balls.
Energy.
Is there a new market?
Could be. Maybe it's just the Kiwi word, but it's like, protein bites or energy bites where it's dates and raisins and nuts all mushed up together, and some people roll coconut on it. Some people make it with avocado and chocolate. So yeah, it's just little energy bites.
Honestly, I think we've stumbled across a gap in the market there, Stacey.
Oh my gosh, there you go. Just go buy some trail mix and put it in your Vitamix, blend it up and roll it into little bites.
We have energy. We do have energy balls and things like that, but I hadn't heard of Bliss Bowls.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Specialty. They're a bit lighter. They're a bit lighter in texture than like your typical energy ball or your Lara bar or something like that. And then when you get to the run, instead of going, oh, I need a gel, you can use glucose tablets. And the beauty of glucose tablets is a quick hit of sugar that starts to be absorbed in the mouth, bypasses digestion. So you're absorbing all the sugar through the mucosal lining and through the cells in the mouth. So it just brings blood sugar up really quickly, and it doesn't have that interference with the digestive system, because they were designed to bring blood sugar up really fast. So there are things that you can think of and manipulate where it sounds really complicated, but it's not. Yes, it's complex, but it's not complicated in the fact that once you realize how your body responds over time in a race, then you can really tailor your nutrition to work for you.
High fat, low carb, you're not a big sort of fan of it. But if you're saying that the ability to process carbs changes as well during the menopause, then what sort of impact does that have on the carbs that you should be taking in, or the fat or whatever?
I guess I hate saying general rule of thumb, but we're going to have to generalize. Yeah, so, like a 40-30-30. So the 40% carb, and then 30 fat, 30 protein. And the carbs, again, are coming from fruit and veg and whole grains, typically, quote, the ancient grains like spelt and amaranth and those kinds of things that come packed with protein and micronutrients that your typical grains don't have. All that helps, with the carbohydrate intake. And then when you're thinking about, well, what am I using in a race situation? Again, you can mix gluten-free oats with some of these, like with quinoa flakes. Mix those together as the base of one of your energy bites to give you some more carbohydrate that's a little bit more quick acting than if you were to eat like a green banana. And then when you're thinking about what are the other two from the fats and stuff, you're just increasing all your plant-based fats for multiple reasons. And from a scientific aspect, it's, again, the diversity of what you're giving your gut to feed it. And you want to encourage the growth of the good bacteria. So plant-based fats are really beneficial for that. And then protein across the board. Lots of lean protein to balance it out.
And does the recovery window change once you get into the menopause?
It's not so much the recovery window. My master's student just finished a study looking at the dose of protein with downhill, like really hard eccentric loading. And the typical 20 gram of protein post-exercise in that 30-minute window really had no effect. So what we found was between 30 and 40 grams of protein within 30 minutes is what you really need when you are in menopause. And again, it's that higher need for protein to promote muscle protein synthesis because you don't have that anabolic response that comes with estrogen. And getting it in relatively quickly around the cessation of training is what's going to help stimulate that muscle protein development.
And practically, what might 30 to 40 grams of protein look like?
I know, it is a bit like, what is that?
Yeah, what is that?
What is it? So one of my favorite go-tos is to make a smoothie. So it's a frozen banana, a cup of non-fat Greek yogurt, non-fat after training because you want it to get into your system very quickly, some chia seeds, some flax seeds, a little bit of cinnamon, and some protein powder, maybe a scoop of protein powder, plant or whey, and an espresso. and you add it in with some almond milk, blend it up, and it's like a latte. And that gives you around that 30-gram hit between the yogurt and the protein powder and the seeds. If you're not using protein powder, you can look to use something like peanut flour. That gives you a little bit more of a thickening agent, but also has protein in it. You could add some nut butter instead. So it's not really a big plate of food, so to speak. If you're thinking about a typical serving, around the palm size of your hand is about 25 grams of protein when you're looking at it from a meat standpoint. Yeah, so post-training, a lot of people are like, oh, I can't eat that much. So if you're getting in that liquid through a smoothie, you're rehydrating, you're promoting your muscle protein synthesis through protein intake. And it also allows you to kind of bring the whole system down a bit before you have your real meal.
It's fascinating. And right, Stacey, I don't think I'd be the only person to say this, but sometimes, especially, maybe it's a more female thing, I'm not sure, but you know, when you're talking about training, sometimes I just think, oh, training, that's people fighting out for those age group spots. That's people, that's that's the professionals. I'm sort of just doing, 6 to 7 hours a week, or 5 to 6, whatever you can fit around family time. But that's still training. It's still that we've got to get these proteins in, isn't it? It's not like I'm not an athlete just because I'm, not winning races or something.
Everyone who has a set schedule where they are going out for purposeful exercise for an end result, like it's a race, and it doesn't have to be a PR. You don't have to be fighting for age group. I call them an athlete, right? Because you are putting your body under stress, not to lose weight per se, and you're not looking at body composition. That's kind of the outfall that happens. But you're focused on getting fitter for a purpose. And if you're getting focused on getting fitter for a purpose, then you need to fuel your body appropriately for that training in order to get those adaptations. So going in fasted training and then delaying your breakfast because of family time is not going to actually benefit you. You're just wasted that time, that early morning time you got up for training. You've increased your stress levels, you've increased your cortisol, you've increased the stimulus to put on body fat because you're not fueling your body for that. So yeah, even if you're only doing 5 hours around family time, those 5 hours are really important for you and for what your goal is. So fuel appropriately.
That's a key message. What is your take on HRT?
So a menopausal replacement therapy, there's a time and a place for it. So if we look at all the data that's come out of the Women's Health Initiative, which was the big intervention study that happened in the U.S. that actually caused people to retract HRT and put all the warnings on it. If you need to be on HRT, get on it and get off it as soon as you can. Because the longer you're on it, the greater your risk is for stroke, for atrial fibrillation, for dementia, for some cancers. But some women, when they start going through menopause, the symptoms are just unbearable. So there is a time and a place for it, but again, be on it for the shortest amount of time. There are other options out there besides taking an oral or a patch, a pharmaceutical agent like that. You can look at using adaptogens like maca and ashwagandha, because both of these interplay with estrogen and cortisol and help attenuate some of the menopausal symptoms. The temperature aspect, no one's figured that out yet. No one understands what a hot flush is. There's so many different theories. But the one thing that we do know is it is because you have this removal of estrogen, and estrogen is very critical for vascular compliance, for constriction and dilation. So when that is removed, there's a trigger of some sort that no one's figured out that causes the hot flushes. So this is the one thing that, like if black cohosh doesn't work, then you might consider going on a very low dose estrogen patch to get you through the first couple of months or 6 months up to a year of symptoms. So yeah, I guess I'm not hard pressed to say yes or no, because there is a time and a place for it, but I'm not blanket telling everyone to use it, and I'm not blanket telling everyone not to.
Do you think it's fair for women to be taking it when they are competing at the pointy end of their age group?
Well, so because menopause happens at so many different ages, and people have different symptomology, I don't know. Is it some kind of ergogenic aid? Possibly, yeah. For women who are dipping down low in testosterone and start to take testosterone for menopause, that becomes a different story. In the fact that testosterone is such a strong anabolic agent that it does give you that advantage at the pointy end of the age group. When you're looking at estrogen and progesterone in very low doses to help attenuate some of the symptoms and symptomology, it may or may not, but it's not as strong as testosterone.
It's so interesting. It's really, really interesting. And so natural remedies then, is there natural stuff that you can take to maybe help prevent sort of sleepless nights or brain fog or mood swings?
Yeah, so this is where your adaptogens come into play. So like I was saying, your ashwagandha is really good for focus and clarity. Shishandra, again, is really good not only for clarity and getting rid of the brain fog, but also has clinical trials behind it to show that it increases the integrity of the mitochondria within the muscle. So it helps with aerobic capacity. And then if you're thinking about hot flushes and some of the bloating and mood swings, black cohosh has a really strong body of literature behind it to show that that helps as well. For the sleep aspect, this becomes a temperature and melatonin aspect, because estrogen does have an interplay with sleep and melatonin. When estrogen comes up, as a lot of women will experience really poor sleep a few days before their period starts, it's because estrogen kind of downplays the way melatonin affects our brain. So if we look at using tart cherry juice, cold tart cherry juice before bed, we're bringing our temperature down, our core temperature down, so that we can get into a sleep. And that tart cherry juice encourages the production of natural melatonin so that you can actually sleep.
And another area which can be really, really difficult, especially if you spend a lot of time on the bike, is pain and saddles. And is there any sort of advice out there for that?
No, there isn't, again, because one, there hasn't been any real research done on it, and a lot of it's anecdotal conversation. One of the things that you can look at is actually changing your saddle and making sure that you're using chamois cream and that kind of stuff. And so with the pain of like the vaginal pain that comes from sitting on the saddle for so long, I mean, I've had some women who have used Ambisol, which is that numbing agent that you put on babies' gums when they're first starting to teeth, and I'm like, whoa, I don't think I can handle that. Some people have done a double chamois. Yeah, so, there's lots of tricks to the trade, but there's no solid research to say, what can be used and what should be used. I'm not so sure.
Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I'm not so convinced that I don't want to use an Ambisol, though.
No, blimey. That doesn't sound... Oh, my God. But that's one of those things that, like, okay, as a coach, even as a female coach, but a lot of coaches are male. You might have female athletes who are in their 50s. Suddenly, they've been absolutely fine on a bike, and then suddenly they have so much dryness down there that it's really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, okay, well, what do? You have lots of different vaginal products out there from the sex orientation, like KY jelly and that kind of stuff. You can ask for prescription vaginal lube that's specific for dryness. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So it's like you have to kind of experiment, but don't be afraid to talk about it, because that's one of the things why it isn't discussed. It's the same as like when you start talking about your period, a lot of people turn their head. But with menopause, it becomes even more of a taboo because it really isn't discussed. Like vaginal dryness, what? Who's talking about that? I don't want to know, right? But it is something that happens, and people need to talk about it, because then there are better solutions. And it could be like, I find something that's not Ambisol that works. I'm going to share it with a person who's using Ambisol. Until we can get more funding and more research done out there. But when you look at the funding aspects that are out there for menopause research, it's all the health, like what are the stroke risks? What are, how do we stop hot flushes? What is the cardiovascular risk? Because now all of a sudden the public burden diseases tick up in women once they hit menopause. Whereas when you look at the earlier research, it's all done on men, right? Through a menstrual cycle health. It's a lot of the research isn't done on the women. It's all done on the men from a performance angle. And then boom, woman hits in their 50s and goes through menopause. Now all the research is there on menopause, but still not on performance, just on looking at the symptomology and the public burden disease risk that comes with it.
You've worked with loads and loads of different athletes. Obviously, you don't name names or anything, but what are some of the almost worst cases that you've seen for women who just thinking, geez, they are going through a tough time there with that?
I think the biggest ones were a lack of thirst sensation coupled with like a hot flash every 3 minutes. And trying to, train for Kona with that going on, like not feeling thirsty, sweating a lot, no thermal control, not being able to sleep, and still trying to train for Kona. And it's like, okay, we got to pull all the tricks out to try to mitigate some of this. And in the end, something as simple as acupuncture helped tremendously, just kind of like refocusing and making the body focus on something that it might have forgotten. So using different meridians to kind of calm nervous system down helped in these two cases. So and then you have the flip side where some people are like, oh, I haven't had my period in 2 years. I guess I must have gone through menopause. It's like, what? Oh, okay. I hope I'm like that. But, so again, it's the flip of the coin.
And what advice, what would your sort of top few tips be, first of all, for female athletes who might be going through this or might have it ahead of them still?
The first and foremost thing would be looking at what you're doing specifically in training, because the more the fitter you are, the evidence out there shows that symptoms are mitigated. So don't lose your fitness. If you're starting to feel flat and you're doing a lot of volume, reevaluate. Like work on the lean muscle mass, work on the intensity, drop some of the volume. And then think about the kinds of foods that you're eating to support overall health, especially your gut microbiome, because there's so much research coming out that shows that the gut affects things from mood to anxiety, depression, sleep, immunity. So if you're taking care of your gut, then you're also kind of feed forwarding good sleep, immune system, bone density, all of those things that are a worry for women who are going through menopause. And then from symptomology standpoint, and if you're suffering significantly from things like hot flushes and inability to sleep, if your natural remedies of adaptogens and black cohosh aren't working, then you can read the research and really consider going on hormone replacement therapy for a short amount of time. And then in a race situation, in a training situation, it's real food. It's food in your pocket to dial in what you're doing for your race and or your training, and then hydration in the bottle. And because the thirst sensation does dissipate the older you get, then think about sip, 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 not, oh, I need to drink X amount every 15 minutes.
And what about advice for coaches then as well? Listen
to your athlete, really. I mean, we tend to try to listen to our athletes, but we don't really hear them for the most part. Like the first phase of getting a woman to track her menstrual cycle, and then all of a sudden it stops. Like if a woman is in her late 40s, early 50s and tracking her menstrual cycle, and then starting to have a lot of irregularities, then that's a kind of a big sign that you're having all these hormone perturbations. So start tracking what's going on over the training. So if you know that you're having a really hard training day and the power's down, and it's the same time that they're having lots of symptoms, then you know, okay, well, we have to be prepared for this, and let's talk objectively about how you felt, how you slept, what you've done from a nutrition standpoint. So gathering lots of information. If you're a coach and you're taking on an older master's athlete and they've gone through menopause or just on the cusp of going through menopause, then think about, okay, well, what's their training history? Because you're going to have an interview with them and find out if it's a match. What's their training history, long volume training? Well, let's not focus on that. Let's really focus on maintaining muscle integrity. Let's do a lot of functional work, power work. And again, just talk to your athletes, see what's working. And if their symptoms are inhibiting their training or if it's not, and how they're supporting their training with their nutrition.
Awesome stuff. Loads of useful information there for us from Dr. Stacy Sims. And we've got links to Stacey's book, Raw, and a Facebook page in the show notes if you check those out, either in the podcast or actually on the website.
Rob, honestly, that is the kind of interview that you might have to go back and listen to a few times, because I remember when I was doing it and I sat here thinking, oh my God, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Wow. No, didn't. Oh my God. Wow.
She's good.
She's really, really good, and she knows her stuff. And I do really think that there are some important messages from her about communication, keeping track of your periods, listening to your body, and adapting your training, recovery, and nutrition. But seriously, I cannot recommend that book highly enough. I ordered it when I first heard about it, and it was quite new out, and it is really, really good.
Cool stuff. So our next guest is an ultra runner who's aiming to raise awareness of the menopause by attempting to break the world record for the number of ultra marathons run on a 400-meter track, if you can believe that.
So it's 12 days of running an ultra marathon on a track in Orkney, Rob.
As you do.
As you do. But I know that she's doing it to help people talk more about the menopause. She spoke to me very openly about the side effects that it's had on her, both in terms of her running and her home life.
I'm Erica Clarkson. I'm 48 years old. I live on the Orkney Islands in the north of Scotland. And I am a very happy perimenopausal ultra runner.
I love that. So in plain English then, a happy perimenopausal ultra runner, that's quite a mouthful.
Yeah.
How would you describe yourself a little bit further?
Okay, so in terms of my running, I'm a relatively newcomer to ultra distances. I ran as a youngster and I was always quite fast. I was always chosen for the team, and I was quite competitive, and I noticed that as I got older I was getting slower. So actually what happened, because I am competitive, is that I just stopped. Everything stopped, and I actually became quite fat. I can say that now. I couldn't say it at the time. I was really unhealthy. I ate badly. I love food, but I was eating all the wrong stuff. So really high carb and really high fat. So, I wasn't...
Neither way.
Neither way. It was just anything. And, processed foods and cake, and, I love baking. And I was actually probably quite an unhappy person. I'm 5'2". I was nearly 12 stone. So that gives you some indication of the size I've become. And I'm not naturally a big person. I've got size 3 feet. I'm very petite normally, and I was sad. So I took up running, but that kind of leads that wasn't just the only reason. I was experiencing these symptoms, these perimenopausal symptoms, although I didn't know it at the time. And I knew I needed to do something. I knew I needed to take some action.
So how old were you when you started experiencing the perimenopausal symptoms?
On reflection, I think I was younger than 45. I think in my early 40s, I started to feel different. And I thought it was all to do with my weight, and I thought it was all to do with my lifestyle.
And it wasn't?
Well, no, it wasn't. And actually, there were a whole range of symptoms. Night sweats is an obvious one, and those can happen in perimenopause. You don't have to wait to be menopausal for that to happen. So I'd wake up in the night, and I'd be like sweating like a racehorse, and very unpleasant. Having to change the bed sheets every couple of days, it wasn't nice. And that in itself leads to trouble sleeping. So I wasn't sleeping well. So I was really tired. So I was eating more carbs and processed food because I needed to try and get my energy up. And I was just getting fatter and more unhealthy. Memory loss was a huge problem, actually. Like my immediate recall was really poor. And I'd always had a very sharp mind. I'd always been, quite academic and quite witty. And I was able to kind of come back on things really quickly. But that became a problem. So brain fog, I noticed that. And that I'd really kind of lost my edge. I think I thought that was down to my poor diet. Poor diet, no exercise. Loss of libido is another thing. That was starting to become a problem. My poor husband was suffering in that regard. But generally, I was kind of feeling down. I had aching joints, unbelievably achy joints. And again, I thought that's just not down to weight. I'm a fatty. So, I'm a big girl and my joints are sore. My energy level's super low. And my hair started to thin out.
Really?
Yeah. So I love my hair. I have long hair, and it was just starting to come out. And every time I brushed my hair, I'd lose loads of it. And my skin was dry. A couple of running-related things, actually. When I did start running, before I knew I was perimenopausal, I was getting chest pain. Okay. And I thought, I was absolutely convinced I was going to have a heart attack, and I had to stop running. And that was it. I just couldn't, I was doing the couch to 5K, and I was thinking, oh, I'm having a heart attack here. So that is actually can be a symptom of perimenopause and menopause, but it's a little known one. I was weeping all the time. I was super anxious all the time, and I was so tired. So again, running related, my recovery was really slow. I wasn't running far at that time. I couldn't. I wasn't fit enough. I was too heavy, and I was still like, I'd collapse on the sofa and think, oh. That was awful, and I can't possibly do that again tomorrow.
Like after sort of 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it was ridiculous, and because I'd always been really fit as a younger woman. So, that was, it was a tough one for me, actually, because one of the things I always I was proud about was my recovery. So whether I was doing sprint work or speed work or whatever it was, I could bounce back really, really quickly. And that started to diminish, and I felt really bad about that. But then what happened was I started running, and I was starting to get serious about my running. I was competing, and I was starting to run longer distances. So because I'd lost my speed, and because I have a competitive edge, I just upped my distance to ultramarathons. And I found that actually my recovery was really bad. By this time, I was probably calorie deficient because I'd started to really think about my weight loss as well, because I was blaming my weight on all of these symptoms. That long list of symptoms I'd given you, I thought were all down to just being heavy and unfit. So it got pretty bad earlier this year, and my mood swings became really noticeably worse.
And was that colleagues or like your family?
So I was frustrated with my colleagues at work all the time. They just frustrated me, annoyed me. I didn't have time for them. But actually, no, it was at home. And, I'm going to be really honest here. And there was a moment where my husband is adorable, Adam. He's amazing and very placid and gentle. And I actually lost it one day. And I don't know what it was about. I can't even remember what it was about. It was nothing. And I took a knife out of the dishwasher. And I didn't know who I was going to stab, him or myself. I didn't know who I was going to stab, Adam or me. But I was so angry about something, and I don't really know what it was. So the light bulb went off, and I went to see my GP. He signed me off work. He was brilliant, actually. But what he did do, and this frustrated me very much, that he offered me antidepressants.
Yeah.
So I took some time off work. I didn't take antidepressants. I sat down one day, again, another defining moment for me was that I just Googled it. I just Googled my symptoms. and how anxious I was about those. And up popped a website by an organisation called Wellbeing for Women, who are a charity, London-based, really fantastic, and they do peer-reviewed research. And they had pages and pages and pages of stuff about the menopause and perimenopause. And I read this and I identified with it, and I just knew that was what I was experiencing. But up until that point, I didn't know. See, the thing is, Helen, I think I thought I couldn't possibly be perimenopausal because the narrative around the menopause is that women are sour, that they're grumpy, that they're sweaty, that they're sexless, that they're dried up old hags, that we're hysterical kleptomaniacs with murderous tendencies, that I didn't want to think that in my mid-40s, my fertile days were coming to an end.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot. I was in denial, but actually, when I started reading about it and researching it and hearing from other women, the fog lifted, and I was able to go back to my GP and speak to him about options for treatment.
And so your GP had initially thought that it was mainly depression. It was not. They didn't think at all about the menopause.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, he was very well intentioned. He's a great guy. As I said, he's a runner, so he's brilliant. He's treated me for many running injuries, but when it came to the menopause, by his own admission, actually, he did say to me, he said, "Erica, I actually don't know what to do for you. I'm going to have to go away and research this." So he did. But before that, yes, despite the fact that about 1.5 million British women will be experiencing perimenopause and menopause every single year, he was remarkably uninformed at that time, and he thought antidepressants were probably what I needed.
How was the running helped?
Oh, wow. Okay, so my weight has, obviously, I've dropped a lot of weight. I always feel a lot better when I run, obviously, who doesn't? It can be hard here in Orkney. So in the north of Scotland, the weather isn't always great. So it can be a huge challenge some days, especially in the winter, getting out there and running. But actually, I try to do it every day. I try to get out every day and do what I need to do. So it gives you all the things that runners talk about, the headspace, the time to think problems through, and just that kind of. I think I'm so grateful that I can be 48 and still run. And I know 48 isn't old in today's terms, but I feel so grateful that I can do that. And I feel so proud of myself that I can do that and be better than people that are half my age, be quicker and faster and stronger. And I love that. So that sounds a bit arrogant, so forgive me, but I just think that I'm very lucky, very blessed to be able to do that. So in terms of menopausal symptoms, I think obviously you run, the weight comes off. You're much more focused on your body and your nutrition and the whole kind of holistic way of looking after yourself. So you sleep better because you're running, and so you're resting more because tomorrow you've got a long run or you've just done a long run. So that helps a lot. And another really amazing thing that I've discovered through running, and especially the ultra running community, is just the sense of friendship. The friendships and the camaraderie and the support and the love, and the guidance from the ultra running community is just second to none. And I've discovered all these amazing people who are doing amazing things. Some really incredible women, but and just people doing amazing things at all different sizes and ages and shapes, and it's brilliant, and I love it.
And what are you going to be doing then?
I am going to be attempting to break 2 records, one official world record and one unofficial world record, for the most number of ultra marathons run on a 400-meter running track, and also the most number of standard 26.2 mile ultra marathons run on a running track. So the current records at the moment for ultra marathons it's 7 days on a track, and for marathon distance it's 11 days. So I'm going to aim to do that for 12 days to try and claim both records. And I'm doing that for a number of reasons. So I'm doing that for my own benefit, but also because I want to try and encourage women, particularly midlife women and younger women, who, let's face it, are going to have, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, many of them, are going to experience some of these things to do with perimenopause and menopause. I want people to talk about it, and I want women to seek the support that they need. I know not everybody needs support, but there are lots of women that do, and I just want them to feel emboldened and informed enough to go to their doctors and say, okay, this is what I think is happening. How can you help me?
So the prospect of running around a track for 12 days, right, is that how many hours a day will you be running around the track?
So I'm not entirely sure in terms of hours, but it's 124 laps of the track every day. I suppose it will get slower over time. I might start maybe 6 hours, so it's 5-6 hours.
Have you ever done anything like this before, Erica?
So I spent a lot of time on the track here in Orkney. I've done a lot of it. So one of my training runs last weekend was, I can't remember now, 16, 17 miles on the track, 14 miles on the treadmill, 17 miles on the track. And I just got it done. You just get it done. Music helps. I love listening to music and a few podcasts.
And good luck to Erica with that world record attempt. I've got to say, Hals, I can't imagine running around a track for 6 hours a day for 12 days.
I can't imagine doing it for, 60 minutes around a track I could probably just about do, but not for 12 days, Rob. No way. Not for 6 hours a day. Yeah.
Oh, bless.
Good though. If it gets people talking, then it can only be a good thing. I think. Well, I think, Rob, that pretty much brings us to the end of our Menopause Special. A massive thank you once again to Melanie Hayes, Fiona Russell and Erica Clarkson for sharing their experiences so openly. Also to Dr Juliet McGrattan for explaining the menopause and the perimenopause so clearly and concisely at the start. And of course Dr Stacy Sims too for sharing her knowledge and expertise with us.
Yeah, cracking stuff. And thanks again once more to our sponsors, precisionhydration.com. Remember, you can use the code OxygenAddict for £9.99 worth of free precision hydration. To foodcell.co.uk, where you can use the code FREEPOST for free delivery worldwide. And to stompthepedal.co, where you can use the code OxygenAddict for 20% off. That's at stompthepedal.co.
If you've enjoyed this show or learned something from it, then please do share it and help others. You can leave us a 5-star review on iTunes too. That's really, really helpful to help us get more cool guests on this podcast. And you can leave us a comment on the Oxygen Addict Triathlon Community Facebook group or find us on Twitter. And if there are any other sort of special topics like this that you do want us to look at and cover and start talking about, then let us know. You can drop me an email, helen@oxygenaddict.com.
Cool stuff. All right, everybody. Hope you've enjoyed listening to this. Well done if you've taken all of that in, and you're a male listener especially who's started thinking out, I'm not sure this is for me, but you've actually got all the way to the end of this. And if you are in that boat, I'd like to hear from you on Twitter or Facebook to sort of celebrate the fact that, we stepped outside our comfort zone a little bit and we listened to this, and who knows, maybe we've even learned some stuff that's going to help us and our families out, Hels.
I hope so. Really, really hope so.
Definitely. All right, so until next week, I'm Coach Rob Wilby.
I'm Helen Murray.
And you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict Triathlon podcast. Have a great, safe training and racing week, everybody, and we'll speak to you all again soon. Take care now. See ya.